Drivetrain work, day number 1. This is dated March 18th of 2006. It may be a little unfair to call this day 1 of drivetrain work, but I think most of this page will probably be devoted to the motor. I might open the cover of the tranny and put a new filter in there, but there would be little else to mention. I might make mention that I am getting a drive shaft made, or this is what I'm doing with the shifter, etc. I am putting a 283 Chevy motor that I took out of my 1957 Chevy Bel Air about 20 years ago. I checked the numbers on the thing, and it's out of either a 1961 Chevy car or Corvette. So this weekend I took it completely apart and started assessing what I have to put the motor together for this truck. I put some Easy Off cleaner in the block and ran some hot water through my pressure washer to clean off the grease on the block. I got it back in all swabbed, and the machine surfaces down with an oily rag. 5 of the 8 top compression rings were broken on this motor on cylinders 2, 4, 6, 7, and 8. Through all of this, the motor ran when I took it out of the 57, but there was little scoring on the walls of the cylinder. It also looks like this motor was worked on once before. The tops of the cylinder walls were flared out, and I noticed that one of the head alignment pins was malleated as if an attempt was made to remove it at one point. I'm not sure if a new head will fit on this thing, so this issue will need to be addressed. Drivetrain work, day number 2, March 26th of 2006. Thanks again to Bob Schmidt. He took me over to Phase 2 engine millwork under Watson Road Auto Parts. Mike had an extra 283 piston with a rod and gave it to Schmidt, a most generous individual. I'll be stopping by to see Mikey again soon. I deburred the lifter valley on the motor and cleaned out the carbon off the pistons. I stopped by AutoZone and picked up a new set of stones for my cylinder hone. Honing was a little tricky. The stones would fill up with extremely fine metal shavings that would stop them from cutting. At first, I used a rag to wipe them off, but then when the filings were heavy, they would not come off that way. I next used a smooth, flat file, but was not happy with how this was wearing away the stone. After a few more times, I used a wire brush, and this cleaned the stones the best. Lastly, I slowed the variable speed drill down to 60 RPM, about a revolution per second, and the stones started skipping on the cylinder wall. This kept the shavings from building up on the stone, gave a nice even pattern to the hone marks in the cylinder, and I got past the varnished goo deposits that I was having to clean off the cylinder walls. These took some elbow grease and a gas-laden rag to remove. I took a flat file to the decks to see if there was some corrosion that I noted there that might happen to be just some head gasket debris. It was not. I should have probably have the decks milled, but I'm going to stick to my poor boy attitude on this project. Same goes for the ring wear I noted in the bottom dead cylinder on the cylinders. This should have been cylinders bored out maybe 30 over, but same comment as before. I'm just trying to build a simple motor back to running shape for a cute little truck to drive around and enjoy. The only hint at performance will be a mild cam to make the motor percolate at the stoplight at idle. I assembled my list of parts, put together the motor, and I'm not sure about some damage incurred in the cam bearings in the block. I'm being told that these are tricky to replace. I put a call into Feist, but I didn't hear back from him. I checked with Scotty the next day, and he wasn't sure. I have a couple of pictures of the block, one of the frame without the front bar. I put on hold things together to hold things together when I was fabbing up the frame components. Drivetrain work, day number 3, dated May 22nd, 2006. I had problems with getting the wrong bearings on some parts from Advanced Auto Parts, and I got the wrong piston from Phase 2 Motorworks. I picked up an opposite bank piston from Mike up there, and he was gracious enough to trade out the piston for the right one. And I'd found the right piston bearings I needed at AutoZone. Got the sharp block all put back together, and I started mocking up the water pump, pulley, and alternator arrangement. Looks like everything's starting to line up and fit. After sealing up the sharp block with a oil pan and cam cover, I painted a block. Drivetrain work, day number 4, dated June 7th, 2006. I'm working on the heads for the motor. I have one bank ready to go back together after cleaning it up, taking it apart, grinding the ports on the intakes and exhaust sides. I'm also clearing out castings just below the seats in the ports. I lapped the valves in on this bank and that is where I stopped. The other side needs to be cleaned, ported, lapped, and we'll be ready to start putting the valve assemblies back together. The objective this weekend is to get the heads done and torqued back onto the shark block. Then I can mate up the tranny and set it into the frame and see how the front suspension reacts. Things are starting to clean up with the fresh black paint on the frame and the Chevy orange of the 283. Drivetrain work, day number 5, dated June 11th, 2006. I finished the headwork and bolted the motor back together. Drivetrain work, day number 6, dated July 15th, 2006. I cleaned out the tranny. There was a bunch of gray muck inside. I put on a new filter and buttoned it back up, bolted on the torque converter to the flex plate, and then could not get things to go back together. It was impossible to line up and hot, so I gave up for the day to try to get things put together tomorrow. Drivetrain work, day number 7, dated July 16th of 2006. I pulled the torque converter off the flex plate. At this point, I noticed that I was trying to put the flex plate on backwards, so I fixed that difficulty. I still could not get the torque converter to go onto the snout of the Turbo 350. I took the old torque converter, I pulled off my 57 Chevy in 1986. It did fit, so I bolted it on to the flex plate and was able to get everything to bolt together. Drivetrain work, day number 9, dated September 17th of 2022. Cleaned up, painted, and torqued in an intake. I also worked up mounts for the alternator. I should soon have a carburetor kit for the 2-barrel Rochester. I'm looking for a water pump pulley combination that will displace the V-belt off the face of the water pump bosses on the 3/8 on the block by 3 3/8 inches. I think they call that a short snout setup for a water pump. And that should allow me to put a mechanical fan on the motor. The radiator I bought online was apparently for a 35 Ford. The filler top of the radiator is 5/8 of an inch too sharp for the cowl that I have for a 36. If I can come up with the proper source of heat to melt the solder on the side mounts, I'll make that adjustment. I'll need to add about 5/8 back on the cowl top spar dowel bracket to keep the cowl hood geometry consistent. I guess at that point, if I'm heating and moving things around on the radiator, then I'll need to see if I can seal off the extra hose connections points that are not required for the modern Chevy setup. Drivetrain work, day number 10, dated September 18th, 2022. I cleaned up the water pump, pulley fan, and starter and found my parts all laying around the shop. Apparently Schmitty gave me these items too. The starter checked out and worked when I connected it to a battery from my Silverado. The solenoid end cap was broken, exposing the electrical connectors in there. I fixed it up, shaping up some old Bondo to get that area to properly enclose. I cleaned both the units up with the wire wheel and painted them up, quantified the bolts needed for each of the units, and picked those up at Lowe's while getting a V-belt at AutoZone. Got everything installed and the engine bay really seems to come together. I put the truck up on the lift to work on the starter and the flywheel cover. The flywheel cover needed rework of the bolt holes. I guess the tranny is a Turbo 350 versus a Power Glide, and thus I had to kind of Johnny Cash it to get the cover to fit it. The left cylinder of the lift leaked like a sieve, so I guess I'll have to take that time and get some new seals in that hydraulic unit. I think I made a separate video for that, so you can actually find that here on the channel. Hey, thanks again for taking a look at this, and I know this is boring. I will get to some live video, hopefully after about 5 or 6 more of these.